12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground.
Wow, that's an entrance, right? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a conversation with our Purdue astronauts. I'm Kirk Cerny. I'm your alumni director here at Purdue, but I also feel like I'm your homeroom teacher. Set your cell phones to stun. That's number one. But secondly, have them out for great photographs. You're going to get a whole reel of fabulous memories tonight. Just like all of you, I'm very proud of the role that your university has played in the history of flight and space. I want to give you just a little bit of an idea of what that history is. Did you know that a 1908 graduate of Purdue Engineering helped the Wright brothers perfect their flyer? He got the 24th pilot's license in America, and guess who taught him to fly? Orville Wright. That's pretty cool. In 1924, one of our graduates led the first flight around the world, planned it and led it. It took 175 days, but they did this 3 years before Charles Lindbergh soloed across the North Atlantic. Did you know that the second person to break the sound barrier, Purdue alum? The first person called Mr. Space was a Purdue alum. The second American in space was a Boilermaker. And of course, the first and most recent men on the moon, both Boilermakers. In all, NASA has selected 23 of our graduates to be astronauts, in addition to the countless Boilermakers who stayed on the ground and worked for the space agency and also for private contractors, too countless to name. Neil Armstrong, we lost him in 2012. He once said to me that every article that's in the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., it's been evolved and involved a Purdue graduate. They've touched every single thing that's in there. And if you've been to that museum, you know the collection is just absolutely amazing. Somebody from Purdue has had something to do with everything that's in there. So why did so many men and women choose to come to Purdue to become astronauts? Well, I would say number one, you'd have to focus on our world-class College of Engineering, world-class College of Science. We had one of the first aero programs in the nation. Certainly the ROTC program had a lot to do with it. We have aviators and pilots that have come here seeking opportunity with our military. Of course, we have an airport on campus. That makes good for practice, right? Another piece of trivia, there was a program in the late 60s and early 70s where graduates from the United States Air Force Academy could come to Purdue to earn a master's degree. And 3 of the astronauts that are with us tonight were part of that program. And finally, it boils down to reputation. If any of you are looking to go into space out there, part of the reason why students come to Purdue is because we have a reputation for sending people to space, and they believe that this university is best for them to get there. I agree. We're excited to have 7 of our astronauts with us on campus. They rose up through the fog. It's very, very cool. They've been here this week rubbing elbows with faculty and students and alumni and just having a great time. They were at the spring game today, but they've been in classrooms and at local schools. It's been great. And tonight, they wanted to share their thoughts with you about the future of human spaceflight, space research, and space exploration. I'm going to introduce our astronauts briefly. As I do this, if you would kindly hold your applause so we can get on with the evening. We could go on talking about their accomplishments all night long, but I know you want to hear from them. So first, I'm going to go in order of graduation. I'm going to introduce someone who needs no introduction. That's Gene Cernan. He earned a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering in 1956. He flew with the Gemini program and twice on Apollo flights, including Apollo 17, the most recent mission to the moon, and he hopes there'll be more.
Thank you.
We also have with us Lauren Shriver. He's an alum with a master's in aeronautics and astronautics from 1968. He's a veteran of 3 space flights and logged 386 hours in space. Also with us is alumnus Charles Walker. He received a bachelor's in aeronautics and astronautics in 1971. He was the first Purdue alumnus to fly aboard a space shuttle, serving on 3 missions as the first industry-sponsored engineer and researcher and becoming the first private astronaut in space. We have with us Gary Payton. He also received a master's in aeronautics and astronautics in 1972. He flew aboard Discovery as a payload specialist in 1985 in the first U.S. Department of Defense mission of the Space Shuttle program. He traveled on that flight 1.2 million miles in 48 Earth orbits, logging about 73 hours in space. Mark Brown is our next astronaut. He received his bachelor's in aeronautics and astronautics in 1973. He flew on 2 space shuttle flights, including a 5-day defense-related mission in 1989, and logged more than 249 hours in space. Next to Mark is Scott Tingle. He earned his master's in mechanical engineering in 1988. He's a decorated Navy pilot who became an astronaut in 2012. He's the most recent Purdue alumnus selected by NASA to be part of the astronaut program today. And finally, alumnus Andrew Feustel. Drew earned his bachelor's degree in solid earth sciences in 1989, a master's in geophysics in 1991, and he flew on 2 space shuttle missions in 2009 and 2011, conducting several spacewalks to service the Hubble Space Telescope and the International Space Station, respectively. He is an active NASA astronaut. We have a lot to cover in a brief period of time here with you this evening, so let's get on with it. We will have the opportunity to ask some questions as participants from the audience. So the cards that you received when you arrived, we'll have volunteers pick those up at the end of your rows. So fill those out, pass those down. I'll give you a cue of when you can do the card passing. But first of all, with all of those introductions and the prep for the forum, why don't we give another round of applause for our astronauts that have joined us tonight. Now, as the first man in space, Alan Shepard, so famously said from the launch pad, "Let's light this candle." Let me introduce the moderator of our program tonight. He's not only Purdue's president, but he is the co-chair of the National Human Space Flight Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, Purdue President Mitch Daniels.
Thanks a lot, fellow Boilermakers, and welcome. You must feel privileged just to be here in the presence of these men. Imagine how privileged I feel to be here with them and to have the opportunity to ask the first 2 or 3 questions while you prepare your own. It must be obvious to everyone present, must have crossed your mind, there is not another university on the planet who could assemble a group like this. No other university anywhere has done more for the nation's interests through contributions to its leadership space program than Purdue University. And here is the living embodiment of that enormous contribution. You know, you've read their bios, you've followed them as I have probably most of your lives. Kirk just summarized. Did it occur to you the other lives they might have led? The other choices, the easier choices, the safer choices, the more remunerative careers they could have chosen with those fabulous degrees that Kirk just summarized. And yet, in the highest expression of patriotism and bravery that we've seen in the recent era, they chose to lead the United States and thereby all of humanity into space. What a magnificent set of lives to have led. How proud Purdue University is to have been a part of those lives. One last thing I'll tell you before we start the questions. We would have been thrilled here simply to have these 7 men and their 2 colleagues who were with us for most of the last 3 days, just for an occasion like this, just for one event. But they insisted on more. And they have worked their tails off for better than 2 days, visiting with high school students, grade school students, and of course our own students by the hundreds and thousands. They've been in the community, they've been all over campus today, and now here with us tonight. Not for the last time. Could you thank these men not only for their earlier contributions, but for this experience? Thank you. Thank you. So it falls to me to ask the first couple, 3 questions, and I will toss each of these to the panel. I think by some prearrangement they've decided on a system for getting us started, but we'll know in just a minute. My first question is this. So many of the benefits of spaceflight and human spaceflight are concrete, very tangible. We can measure them, new products, new technological breakthroughs, the jobs that are part of the space program and so forth. But many of the other valuable byproducts of American leadership in space, while they're very important, are harder to quantify and harder to pin down. So I asked the panel, how do you rank the benefits of space exploration, both tangible and intangible, and in particular, the reasons that human spaceflight is so essential to delivering those benefits? Who's first?
And I'm first, so I'll answer the first question and try to get us rolling. I think the obvious answer for us, and the reason we're here and have been here this week, is the inspiration. And I know that seems maybe cliche to say that because we all talk about, I was inspired by astronauts and space exploration, and I came to Purdue to be an astronaut. I literally made a decision in my life that that was what I was interested in as a child, and I was inspired by what I saw in the space program, and I believed that with this institution and many others across the country, but there was a time in my life where I made a decision because of the inspiration that I had, and none of us really know when we're going to inspire somebody else, some other young individual who's trying to decide what their future would be, but to be able to have that opportunities. I never believed I would be here in front of a crowd like this talking about space program and exploration, but the obvious answer is the intangible of inspiration and how we change people's lives. There are many measures of what we do. There are many technological advantages and commercial as well. But that one, I think, is the most important. And I know for myself personally, I experienced those changes in my life through inspiration of others. And I think the space program and the future and the interest of the human mind is what drives us to seek out new opportunities in life. And if that's not enough, that sort of philosophical, very intangible driver, I think the one that is more obvious and should be more obvious is that as humans, Earth is our only home. This is the only place we have to live. And my experiences looking at the Earth from space allowed me to realize how vulnerable we are on this planet. We are a single planet species. And as John Young had said, and maybe many of you had said before, single planet species don't last. And if you want living proof, just ask the dinosaurs, because they're not here anymore. And there's a reason for that, because our planet's vulnerable, and we as humans are vulnerable. And as a geologist, I know that in the geologic time frame of our Earth, we represent just a speck in that timeline. So if the intangible and philosophical reasons of inspiring generations and people to explore and move forward with our lives is not enough, then I think the notion that Earth is our only home and we need to learn to not only protect it through Earth protection and space systems, but also to learn to live off of this planet, I think is very critical to our future.
Thank you, Drew. Who else?
Let me add something to that, Drew. I'm lucky enough to be on the faculty at the Air Force Academy, and something called STEM is very important to the Air Force, is very important to the nation. Somebody who decides to wrap their life around science, technology, engineering, or math, they typically make that decision somewhere around 6th, 7th, 8th grade. I know I did in 8th grade. Today's 6th, 7th, and 8th graders are bombarded by video games, social media, fantasy movies like Hobbit. And it's very hard for us to get their attention about science, technology, engineering, and math. But the things that do get their attention are topics like volcanoes on Io, methane lakes on Titan. Astronomers at MIT have just released a report of data that was collected by something called the Kepler telescope. That report identified 759 new planets outside our solar system, new planets revolving around other stars. That brings the total to like 1,700 planets that we found around other stars. That's pretty intriguing. That's pretty exciting, even to an 8th grader. There's something called the Goldilocks zone, where we think water could exist on planets that are in this Goldilocks zone. Not so close to their sun that the sun evaporates all the water, but it's not so far away that the water becomes ice. And so this Goldilocks zone is where life, at least the way we understand it biologically, might exist around these other stars. And so out of these 759 new planets revolving around distant stars, 4 of those planets are in this Goldilocks zone, we think. And so here are 4 more places where maybe life has emerged, at least the way we define life. And so those are the kinds of topics that catch the attention of that 8th grader and say, wow, maybe I want to become an astronomer. Maybe I want to become an engineer. Maybe I don't know which one of those I want to become yet, but I know I have to take a lot of math courses to get there, a lot of science courses to get there. And so this topic called STEM is critical to the nation's future. And the space program, both human and robotic, is critical to energizing the interests of these 6th, 7th, and 8th graders and encouraging them to embark upon a future of engineering, math, science, and technology.
Mr. President, one more thought, maybe not. My thought is that human spaceflight, in my mind, means certainly both people in spaceflight, but it also means to me human technology in space. Our instruments that go out before us, with us, and remain after us in space on other worlds, doing our bidding. Human and human-originated spaceflight, to me, is virtually the same thing. We and our tools. So, to me, human spaceflight, the benefits that I see from human spaceflight, we could go through the details, the hundreds of spin-offs, the multiplication in terms of economic outcomes and economic products that have resulted from our investments in space missions and space flight. But I would generalize in my mind that we human beings, in more than 100,000 years of our history, have learned progressively how to control some factors around us in our environment that we think of as basic. We have learned how to control fire. We have learned how to control pressures. We have learned how to control mixtures. And out of these lessons is everything that you see around you today, all that you live and work with, all that is our culture and our technical societies. These are the abilities that allow us to be modern humans. Space travel now allows us to control gravity. Despite what Hollywood presents to you, there is no such thing as anti-gravity rooms or anti-gravity machines, at least not yet. But when we travel at a high enough velocity in that direction, in orbit around the Earth or on our way to other planetary bodies, the microgravity or the low gravity environment is in fact a resultant of that travel. And within that spaceship or that space station, we can control gravity. This is the first time that we human beings have ever been able to do that on an extended basis. It's a whole new realm of human experience and opportunity for humans to develop new technologies, new products, benefits for all of us. To me, this is an aspect of our ability to travel in and through space that is going to provide virtually limitless opportunities in the future. But let me just add one more thing, in that beyond those technical benefits, generalized as I've tried to speak of them, to me, the in fact greatest and longest enduring benefit of human spaceflight is going to be what the ability to view our home planet from beyond provides those of us, the viewers. And I'm not just talking about those of us out here, I'm talking about all of you, because the photograph that Gene brought back from Apollo 17's mission to the moon, the blue marble Earth, photographs that come back from the space station today, high definition images that you see looking down on this Earth and at the horizon of the Earth, traveling at 8 miles a second, the lights of our civilization on the night side of the Earth, the weather, the enormous and ever-present creation which within we live, presented to us by our eyes. These kinds of things and the views of other worlds that will come to us through space travel will change, are already changing human awareness and perception of both our place in the universe and the universe around us, and the results of that will go on as long as there are beings that can be called human beings, and will be immeasurable in terms of benefit.
Could I make
Lauren,
one more?
Sure.
I know we're trying to race the clock here a little bit, so I'll be quick. It's somewhat related to what Drew and Charlie just said, Gary as well. In my view, there was a very distinct benefit that I think often goes overlooked from the very beginnings of our human space program. I refer to it as a national psychic or a national identity, whatever name you want to give to it. But I believe the human space program gelled this country into a unit that was very much like and very similar to the entire couple hundred years of previous history. In other words, we are a people who do things. We think about things and we go do them. And the space program is a wonderful example of that. And just like everybody has said, that alone has inspired and collected inputs and collected intelligence. And I believe it'll continue to do that in the future.
Thank you. Anything further? Let's try this one. The brave and selfless people of the American space program are dealing now, and have for some time, I think it's fair to say, with an array of difficulties, and that not of their own making. Fiscal, is there enough money to do the things that we could do or would like to do? Operational, which things should be done? Is NASA and or its affiliates configured to get them done? And conceptual, what are the targets and the technologies that should be chosen from a very long list of possibilities? So which do you men think are the toughest of these challenges, and what might be some of the answers to propel the program forward at keep its momentum and move it at a faster rate?
I'll take a shot at that one. The array of difficulties that you just cited, I think, stem from all of the same area, and that is that of a nationally supported or shared vision. If we truly had a shared vision, supported at all levels, from the top all the way down to the great people of this great country, these barriers would be minimized and our human spaceflight program would soar. I acknowledge we have a direction. We're going to an asteroid, further on to Mars, sometime in the 2030s, but there still seems to be a lot of debate and a lot of concern, and not so much a shared vision all the way down to the great people of this country. So I think anything we can do to either caress or make a little smoother or support a shared vision throughout the country at all levels will take care of almost everything you cited.
I
I may be a little bit more blunt. I think one of the problems we have in the space program today is not how much money we have. We never have enough money. It's how we use that money. I think one of the biggest drawbacks is the political drawbacks that have affected us, particularly over the last 4, 5, 6 years. We have a Congress, and I know this for a fact, because Neil Armstrong and I had an opportunity to testify in front of the House and the Senate on 3 separate occasions. We have a excited, stimulated, bipartisan Congress who I can say maybe 90% believes as we do. Now, there's other problems that they've got to handle. But in the last 4 or 5 years, think about this. Half a century ago, Americans were walking on the moon. In the last 5 years, we've lost Constellation, which was a program, a goal, a mission to take us back to the moon and really exploit the resources and the opportunities that the moon presents us, probably by the early 20s, with the same capability to build on the same hardware to eventually take us to Mars. Now, I happen to be one, and I think everybody here on this stage believes that that will happen at some point in time. But unfortunately, it's not going to happen in 2020 and 2030. We had a space shuttle. I have never flown it, but I consider it the finest flying machine that we have ever designed, built, and flown. And I envy these guys tremendously for having that opportunity. We had probably one of the greatest engineering feats in modern mankind, assembling that space station. I mean, don't ever take that for granted, what it took to do it and the capability that is housed in that space station. Today, we don't have a space shuttle. Got a lot of them in museums, but none of them can go anywhere. We have a space station, but the fact of life is we cannot get to our space station on American hardware. That's where we find ourselves today. And I think that's one of the biggest, most prominent problems that we have to solve in this country. We talk about someday we're going to go to an asteroid. Big deal. What are we going to do with that? I don't know. Someday, we're going to go to Mars. But those somedays are not a mission. They're not a goal. They don't inspire anyone. You can put, President Daniels, you can put the smartest and brightest engineers here at Purdue in one room and say, create some technology to do something. Let me take you back to the 60s, the terrible 60s, when the Russians owned space, when the country was torn by civil strife, campus unrest, the beginnings of a very unpopular war, and we had a president called John F. Kennedy. I don't know whether he was a visionary, a dreamer, politically astute. He was probably all three. And he recognized the importance of a goal, of a mission, of rallying this country together, like you were just talking about a minute ago. And 3 weeks after Alan Shepard went up and went down, the only mission we had at that time was getting men in space and see whether they could survive and work and whatever. 3 weeks after Alan Shepard went up and down on a 16-minute suborbital space flight, the President of the United States said, okay, folks, I guess we're smart enough. He didn't, but he implied that we'll use Purdue engineers to get us there. He said, we're going to... It's pretty obvious to me. And let me say this. There may be 23 astronauts, and we're all proud, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. This is where we took our first steps into space. But there are hundreds and hundreds of engineers throughout this country, many of them were throughout NASA, who are the people that made it possible. So don't ever count yourself out. But he said, okay, we're smart enough. We're going to go to the moon. He challenged the American people to do something that most, and I was 27-year-old young naval aviator, you know, could do almost anything there was to do at that age of my life. And I was one of those people that was thinking, he's asking us to do the impossible. He's asking us to do what cannot be done. Don't tell the American people they can't do it. And you know what the rest. He not only said we're going to go to the moon and do the other things, but we're going to do it in this decade, not because it is hard, not it is because it's easy, but because it is hard. And the point I'm making is we had a goal, we had a mission, we rallied the country, and the rest is history. We don't have that today. That is the one factor that I believe is limiting man's desire to explore. Curiosity is the essence of human existence. Where are we? Who are we? Where we're going? Where we came from? What's it going to be like? Was there life on Mars? And it's our destiny to put together the impact of man's curiosity to again take us where we've never been before, to go where what we've never seen before. And President Daniels, that's what this country has got to do. It's got to rally these young people you talked about, inspire with passion those young kids to dream about doing the impossible once again. We've done it. I went to the moon before 3/4 of this audience was born. You tell me what you can't do in this world. Mm-hmm. Just think about it.
It's so out of character for you to be so candid, Gene. I know we all feel very fortunate this rare outburst. That was great. Thank you very much. Anything further on that question? I have one more, and I think it follows from comments we just heard 2 or 3 times. Plenty of disagreement about various aspects of space program, human spaceflight. But one thing that it seems most people do agree on is that the goal at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, the so-called horizon destination, frontier destination, ought to be Mars. Here we have 7 of the most expert people in the world about the challenges of doing that. Can you talk about which of those challenges, technological, physiological, psychological, and so forth, you think are the most daunting? Which ones or is it most important to resolve so that that fabulous dream can come true?
Well, I'll start that one. And I guess to begin with, I think it's fairly obvious that everybody can see what appreciation and passion we have for Purdue University. And we are all sincerely appreciative of what it's meant in our lives. The thing that comes second to that is the appreciation we have for our wives who have made this journey with us. And in many cases, we are true Purdue families. And I'm going to use myself as an example, and the others will also. I met my wife here. Both of my daughters that we were blessed with went through Purdue. Both of their husbands were educated and graduated here from Purdue. And I have a grandson that's 3 years old that will sit here for freshman orientation. Thank you. And by the way, next month we're going to celebrate our 40th anniversary. So happy anniversary. Yeah. Now, to answer the question, one of the things that was mentioned we've done the last couple of days is speak to faculty, speak to students, speak to the public, and ask those very questions. And sometimes when you ask a Purdue student what they think, you actually hear, a very direct answer. And we did this time. And we asked them about the moon and Mars. And they were not satisfied with that. They want our country to adopt a program that has a longer vision and longer legs. They don't want to go through the experience of Apollo, where we had a very robust program that lasted roughly for a decade, and then we went into a big lull. They don't want to see a repeat of the shuttle program, where we do incredibly amazing things with reusable spacecraft,
and then we go into the doldrums, and we have to wait another decade before we again have our own access to space. They have told us they want to have a long-term vision that, yes, it does include the moon, it does include Mars, but it should not stop there. It should pave the way for careers, for jobs, and for futures for all of the people, not just coming into this career field, but for our nation for the long term. You guys want to add to that?
I might make a comment that goes right along with that. I think the most difficult aspect of going into space today is this kind of lack of national unity, national vision that Gene talked about that we had in the past, and that it's very difficult, even more so today, I believe, than to try to formulate that or get consensus on it than it ever has been in the past. I'm not sure exactly why that is. I have some ideas, but anyway, I think that the hardest thing to get to is getting enough people. The other day with a group of folks, I used the old adage, there are too many cooks in the kitchen. Too many cooks in the kitchen means that when NASA does come up with an idea, and they've done that many, many times, there are too many naysayers, either in the Congress or in the science community or wherever you want to look, that it doesn't scratch their itch, so it can't be any good. Well, we all need to kind of broaden the blinders a little bit and take in a higher vision of what it is we should be doing as a country, how we want to motivate our children to do great and wondrous things, the whole 9 yards. But that, in my opinion, is more difficult today than solving many of the technical problems that will have to be dealt with if you want to go to Mars. But I believe that from what I saw in the last 2 days, that's a doable do, and we can get after that right away. But the other part is going to take a lot of work.
Let me just say this. It's our generation. I look at these kids over here. It's still their generation too. It's our generation to give you young students, your kids, your grandkids, whoever they are, the opportunity, inspire them with passion to do what has been done on this stage, to do what to take that next giant leap that Neil left undone. That's the responsibility. That's what we owe you.
President Daniels, President Daniels, I'd like to add a thought, which is that when I was, even before high school, I was reading reading fiction, science fiction. An American author in the early 1950s, years before the first satellites were ever launched, began a story of science fiction with words something like this. Sure, Space Station 1 was hard and had problems, but the most difficult problem in building that space station was people. And the story went on then to describe the difficulties, political, financial, operational, and otherwise, to create, operate, and produce benefit from a station in space orbiting this planet. And sure enough, in generalities and specifics alike, building space stations have had many problems, and many of the problems have in fact been people caused, either indirectly or directly, certainly. Hey, we all drive and ride in automobiles. The biggest problem with an automobile is that pink, soft driver and passenger inside. The least reliable part and the most easily damaged part are we people. But we drive them. They're necessary. In life, we have to recognize risk, accept it and manage it. Those are just basics, and making those things happen and understanding them is the hardest part, but that's what life is all about. Space flight, space travel is now part of our lives, and it must continue to be part of our lives in directions that provide us benefit, and directions and with destinations that are boundless. And let me blend in another thought here in that regard, which is, and Mr. President, you mentioned in your question the term horizon destination. I'll be so bold as to say I think that's a wrong terminology. That's in error. I have been blessed with the opportunity, originating with my education, my fantastic education at this great university, through this great country of ours, and the technology, as Gene, I agree completely, the space shuttle as a transportation system from Earth's surface into orbital space and back again is a most fantastic flying machine, and will go down, is already down in history as a tremendously successful and capable accomplishment of we human beings and we Americans. I had the opportunity to fly on 2 different vehicles and 3 different times to space and back again. I've dabbled in my toes in what I think of as the ocean of space. Out there in that ocean, there are places, but the horizon, there is no horizon. The horizon, if one would want to use that term, is in fact infinite. And I think we need to have clarity of thought in our own minds and in policy decisions in terms of that pursuit of space flight for national and for human benefit. Perspective that is, there is no horizon out there to be reached and then stop, as the implication might be. There are islands out there in that ocean of space. There are destinations that are more distant than the nearest island we can see, maybe the moon. Mars is a little bit more distant island, and definitely we need to go there, because what is progress but moving from one place, step, accomplishment on to the next? But progress implies no end. Space does not have an end, and we should not stop going there.
By now we have some questions from the audience, and Kirk, you going to read them for us?
Yes, as a matter of fact, your questions have just been picked up. I'm sure you saw our students coming up and down the aisle. As Michelle Erb, who is one of our students who will be reading the questions tonight, makes her way to the stage. And by the way, Michelle is part of a student group that's called the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space. We have actually a group that does that, right? Isn't that cool about Purdue? As she makes her way to the stage to ask the questions of our guests tonight, I want to let you know that clearly we won't be able to answer every question, but Purdue has established a website which is very, very easy. It's purdue.edu/space. Purdue.edu/space, where you can post your questions, and astronaut experts will provide answers on that webpage. And I'm sure as we continue our conversation with our astronauts in the future, those elements that are there, both from tonight and after tonight, will be valuable for not only those of you in the audience to enjoy, but also our alumni and friends, students, and prospective students worldwide. So with that, Michelle, are you making your way this direction by chance? And as we do that, any final candor or thoughts on the 3 questions that the President put to you, gentlemen?
Dangerous to open up the floodgates.
Well, I know, open-ended, right, for this group.
There's no questions out there?
They should be coming this
Michelle's
direction.
lost
This is
space.
So in that, President Daniels, do you have a 4th question that you would like to lob across the bow?
Yeah. No, I mean, someone, and it might have been Gary, I thought raised one of the important, really important matters for everyone to think about, astronauts, engineers, citizens alike, and it has to do with risk. You know, we're a very risk-averse society. We live in the safest world by far that ever existed. We're safer from disease. We're safer from accident. We're safer from everything, and that has historically ended life too soon. And I think some people, sort of subconsciously even, have embraced the idea that nothing's ever supposed to go wrong ever to anyone. Spaceflight doesn't lend itself very well to that, others would say. And Gary, I think it was you who said life is about risk. Risk is a bigger factor possibly in the careers you men have chosen than almost any we can think of. You want to talk about the risks you run, the risks how much risk should or should we not ask tomorrow's astronauts to run?
It's got to do with risk versus reward. I would couch it in those terms. The life expectancy of Americans, the life expectancy of humans has improved dramatically during the 20th century and 21st century. But when you talk about risk for everyday life, like President Daniels mentioned, we're pretty good at it. But when that reward is worth it, well, then you have to up your tolerance for risk. And we've got expert engineers who know how to do redundant systems, who know how to add design margin, but we can't think of everything. And so there is risk to spaceflight, but it's worth, the rewards make it worthwhile.
Can I say, you know, no one ever guaranteed that we'd get back home. And we didn't ask for a guarantee. On the other hand, for myself, I didn't go to the moon to be a martyr. I didn't go to the moon not to come home. And I think we've had a culture over the last several years in this country of being somewhat risk averse. You know, what's in it for me if I do it? And that's not the culture. That's not the history of this country. And that's something else we have to overcome. We put our pants on one leg at a time, just like you do, Mr. President. Just like everyone out there. We're no different. We've just been at the right place at the right time and been given an opportunity to do something that we thought was worthwhile. And yes, it carried risk. And yes, we've paid dearly for our mistakes in the past. We've lost several of our colleagues. There were times when I thought back there at Arlington we were burying the entire space program rather than just simply 3 or 4 of our colleagues. And that probably will continue to happen. But it's in our psyche. It's in our nature. It's part of who and what we are and where we came from. That's why I'm extremely confident in the future. Despite this little blip we find ourselves in, that we will go out there, we will go to the moon, and we will exploit its resources, and we will go to Mars. And I can't think beyond that. My psyche doesn't take me beyond Mars, but there's other places, as you said, all over the place. And we'll discover what life is all about. All we know about life is who and what we are. And so the impact on space, on the future of mankind on this planet is so unbelievably exponential. It's just something else. And let me say, well, I've got 2 seconds more. We haven't talked about the impact and importance of leadership, space technology, being a leader in space technology in the world. What does that mean to us? It's got diplomatic impact. Look where we find ourselves today. Look where we are today. If Mr. Putin, this is politics integrated into space technology, if Mr. Putin wanted to say, we just decided not to take you up to your space station anymore, where would that leave us? The impact of space leadership to be able to do what we want, when we want, is the thing that got us where we are today as a nation. Not just space technology, that leadership got us here for the last 230 some odd years, whatever it is. And I believe, because it's who we are, that it will take us into the future and we'll get back on top, because we're the kind of people where second best is never going to be good enough.
Well said.
Well, President Daniels and team, from the depths and the darkness of space, backstage, I found Michelle.
All right.
So Michelle Erbs, ladies and gentlemen, will ask some more questions from you for our astronauts. Michelle, go ahead.
Like he said, I'm Michelle. I'm a graduating senior in Aero and Astro Engineering, and I have a couple of questions that you guys have written down today. So this is from Bill, and of course, being a Purdue graduate, I also want to know this as well. How did your education at Purdue help you become an astronaut and help you during your times in space? What would you advise aspiring astronauts here? What would you say to aspiring astronauts here tonight?
Well, I can make a comment. I think it's safe to say without the educational background I had, very similar to Gary, Air Force Academy, and then here, I'd be doing something totally different. My entire life would have been different if I had gone to different institutions or sought out a different educational path. Education is so important in what we do. It forms the basis of everything, your thought process, your ability to think through difficult decisions, do the right thing, so to speak. And so I think an educational system that not only teaches you the fundamentals and the basics, but also teaches you how to think on your own without, your mom or dad reminding you to do your homework, all that kind of stuff. There's more to education than just opening the book and reading. You got to learn how to put it all together and then think about what you've learned and then apply it.
Let me add one too. This one surprised me. I went back to my elementary school back in Illinois, and a group of 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th graders, and filled the auditorium, smaller auditorium than this. But I gave my little talk, and then it's typical stuff. And inevitably somebody asks how to use the toilet in space and that kind of stuff. But one of the 6th graders said, "Did you always want to be an astronaut?" And I said, "The job astronaut didn't exist when I was in elementary school." And so, capitalizing on what Lauren says, that educational foundation, whether it's elementary school or Purdue or anything in between, prepares you for something that you're never ever going to predict that you're going to be doing 20 years later or whenever. And so that's why institutions like Purdue are so critical to our future, because they teach people not only aeronautics and astronautics and all the great engineering, but they teach people how to think, how to learn. And learning never stops. It's a continuous thing throughout your entire career, throughout your entire life. And so that's why we love coming back to Purdue, because this is one of the places that not only teaches you the textbook stuff, but teaches you how to think.
And I'd like to add on to that, too. One of the reasons that we come back and spend a lot of time interacting with students is, first of all, to try to bring the halo down a little bit so they can see that, we're kind of normal people that, went through engineering, went to Purdue, had normal life problems, struggled with finances and all of that. The thing that made a difference, if anything, in addition to our education, is we were willing to take a chance. We were willing to raise our hands, like Gene said, and volunteer for that job, that assignment, that opportunity, knowing full well that we might fail, but we might succeed. Most of us that applied for the space program the first time failed and were rejected. I can speak for myself. I applied, didn't make it. It was the second time when I was picked up. And we would tell every one of our students and encourage them to take that step forward, overcome your inhibitions, and take a leap of faith. And as parents and as instructors and professors, it's our job to encourage them to do that, because that's what our next generation of astronauts, people to be on this podium, relies upon, is that gentle push from behind, quietly saying, you can do this.
Okay, so our second question we have is, did you get homesick? Oh, this is from Bliss. Did you get homesick? Were you sad when you left the moon? I'm guessing this is, or space in general.
When you left the moon?
Oh,
did you get
me?
homesick?
Or anybody, just who in space. Was it sad?
Of course I was sad when I left the moon. Anyone here would be. We were there for 75 hours, probably. Time is your greatest asset because you're there. It's your greatest enemy because you don't never have enough of it. People always ask me, how was that first step on the moon? Well, by the time I got there, the first steps have already been taken. But it was my first step. And once you step foot on Apollo 10, I came close, 47,000 feet. But close is only good enough in horseshoes, and that I needed to go back for a lot of reasons. And one of them, I needed to go back with the opportunity to command a crew. And maybe you ought to think about this. I felt like I've been an underdog all my life. I got selected for the space program without being qualified. And one thing led to another, and the rest of it, from the days I left here, my life has been a fantasy, quite frankly. And I needed to prove to myself at that point that I was good enough. And when I made that first step on the moon, I felt like I had accomplished what I set out to do. But the nostalgic part, you asked about the last step. The one I remember most was taking that last step, because I started up the ladder, looked down at that last footprint, and I knew I wasn't coming this way again. Somebody would, but it wouldn't be me. And I tried to figure out what it meant for our generation to leave our planet, to leave the cradle, and live on another planet, quote, that we've chosen to call the moon. Live and work, not just survive. And I wanted to bring home something to you. To tell you what we did, what did it mean? I'm not sure what it does. Here I am 41 years later, and I'm not sure what it meant. I don't know how long it took for civilization to realize the importance of Columbus's voyage, but I expect more than 41 years. And over my shoulder, the most emotional thing was, over my shoulder was the Earth. It had been there for the whole time, hadn't moved. It's sitting on top of those mountains in the southwestern sky. And it was there in all its glory, and the multicolors of the blues of the ocean, the whites of the snow and the clouds. I've been watching it for the last several days. I'd seen it on my first flight. Didn't tumble through space, didn't move. Didn't move aimlessly. It moved with purpose and logic. It rotated on an axis. Every 12 hours, you're looking at the other side of the world. And it was surrounded, if you can imagine this, by something I can't define. Infinity? I don't know what that means. But I call it the endlessness of time and space, and I can tell you that it does exist, because I saw it with my own eyes. And three-dimensionally, not like a multicolored picture on a black background that you've seen a million times. Three-dimensionally, there was our Earth, moving through the beauty of this universe, going we not know where, and we were on the moon tagging along. What does that mean? What will it mean? I don't know. And I'm going to say this, and I want to qualify it. I've always felt that going to the moon was a different space program, technologically, philosophically, and spiritually, not religiously, spiritually. So I started to think, what can I bring home to you so that your imagination can answer the question of what it was like? And I somehow came to the conclusion that I literally, without knowing it at the time, had been sitting on God's front porch, looking back home. And if you want to know what it's like to go to the moon, just put yourself out there on God's front porch.
That's pretty good.
Okay, this question is from Steven. What was your most terrifying moment as an astronaut?
You guys want to have a competition for this one?
What's your most gratifying
Most terrifying moment.
Terrifying.
There's a lot of them.
You know, every one of us has had different experiences, and I'm sure the rest of these guys, I mean, I'm not a career astronaut, so these guys are going to say, no terror. Just a job. No, I sat on top of the first attempted launch of the third space shuttle to orbit the Earth eventually, Discovery. She's in the American Smithsonian Museum just outside of Washington, D.C. Go see her. She's a fantastic flying machine that's on display now, but she's still got a smile on her face. That morning in 1984 ended up being the first on-pad launch abort in the space shuttle program, and the second one in the American space program. The first one happened, Gene, before your flights, and Gemini, just before your flights in Gemini. But I'll tell you what, I was, pretty darn terrified when those rocket engines start up for 5 seconds. The crew's attitude is, we're on our way, and suddenly there's this god-awful grinding sound, and then total silence and a little bit of motion as the shuttle is just hinging back and forth on 2 fixed points on the launch pad. 4 million pounds of high explosive underneath of us, and we're not knowing what's just happened. And turned out everything was safed just fine. The fire outside the spacecraft didn't affect us, and the machine's built to withstand a lot of heat, so she got through it just fine. They replaced the rocket engine that was the problem, and we did leave the pad successfully and completed that first of dozens of missions for the good ship Discovery. But that was a terrifying moment for me.
So who's going to top that?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to add a little story about a related. Was Steve Hawley on your flight?
Yes.
Was that?
That was the
Is that
attack
when he made
astronomer's
his-
first mission. Yes, that was.
Steve was an astronomer, a mission specialist, and he was a brilliant guy, an excellent flight engineer, who is the person who sits between the commander and the pilot and back on kind of the second tier of seats. And he went through an on-pad abort also, and he made the now famous comment, I think. He said, gee, I expected to be a lot higher at MECO. It's just people deal
And none of the
with-
rest of us laughed at that.
People deal with these situations a lot differently, but it maybe goes to demonstrate a little bit about there's always a need for some humor in every situation, even though at the time it's kind of hard to grab hold of it. But that's how Steve was, very dry sense of humor.
No one else ever been scared ever,
Well,
right?
Full disclosure. I think one of the things, and we'll all admit to this, one of the things you worry about the most is not taking off on time. And the reason is all of your friends and family make investments to come down to the Cape, hotel rooms, tickets to Disney, the kid, you name it. If you don't launch on time, guess who is held personally responsible?
Good.
So when the engines start up and 6.5 seconds later the solid rocket motor's light, thank God.
I'll share one since I haven't answered any questions a bit. So one of my most terrifying moments in space wasn't really scary. It was just a little unnerving. On my first flight to space, which was the final servicing mission of the Hubble Space Telescope, which was a big deal for the country, It cost a lot of money, and we knew it was the last time that astronauts were going to go to Hubble. And so I felt very lucky to have had that opportunity, very privileged. And I was also lucky enough to be part of the spacewalking team. And I was, in fact, part of the team that was going out the door first. We had 2 teams, and myself and John Grunsfeld, who had been to Hubble before, went out the door first. We were the first EVAs out the door. And the first objective for me was to remove a single bolt that was holding in a $126 million piece of equipment in the Hubble Space Telescope. Now, the way we design space missions, or at least spacewalks, and especially on Hubble, is you prioritize the tasks that are the most important for the space mission. Like, if you don't get that thing done, you know, the rest of it, you may as well not even do the mission. 5 more spacewalks, you may as well write them off. So they sent me out the door with a wrench in my hand and said, your first job is to go remove that bolt. And I got out there on the robotic arm, and I got up to the telescope, and I stuck that wrench in there, and I started to turn the wrench, and the bolt was stuck. And I thought, who was the Einstein that sent the rookie on his first spacewalk with his first job to take that bolt out? Whose idea was that? Because that was really stupid, because now I'm the guy here holding the wrench, and the bolt's stuck. So that was the dramatic part of it. That was what was scary and a little unnerving for me. Fortunately, through the efforts and support of our ground control team and some ingenuity on the airport, we eventually got the bolt to come loose. But I can tell you that in my career so far, that was probably one of the most overwhelming moments for me and most concerning.
Drew, just 3-in-1 oil.
Yeah, next time.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, these astronauts, this president, and this particular space cadet, thank you very much for submitting your questions. Let's thank Michelle also and the students of Exploration and Discovery. Thank you, Michelle. As you may have seen, I walked over to Gene Cernan. Gene wanted to share a few additional thoughts about a very special person. So, Gene.
Thank you. I can't sit here among these guys. We've all talked a bit about it. There's one person that should be here, but is not here, and that's Neil Armstrong. You know, Neil was a world icon. He was a consummate engineer, and every word he spoke could be backed up by historical facts. He was an incredible, and by the way, I believe Callie, his granddaughter, is with us somewhere today. But everybody knows Neil, or reads about Neil, or might remember Neil as the man who took that one small step for man. But we know him as somebody different. He was the most human, easy to know, easy to talk to guy in the world. And I just want to share this one story with you. We were in, I guess 3 years ago, we were in Afghanistan. And those kids over there I was over there with Jim Lovell, Neil, and myself. And boy, when Neil walked in the room, it lit up. It was incredible how these kids felt when he just stepped into their presence. And one young Marine said, "Mr. Armstrong, I want to know how you felt when you were cruising across the lunar surface with only 15 seconds of fuel left." And Neil had a habit, remember this guy, he'd stick his hand up like this with a finger on his nose. He'd say, "Well, young man, we all know when the fuel gauge says empty, there's a gallon or 2 left in the tank." Ladies and gentlemen, that is your Neil Armstrong. He belongs to America, he belongs to the world, but he belongs to Purdue University. And never, ever forget what he did or what he means to this institution. Thank you.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we've covered a lot of ground and we've covered a lot of space. We would like, hey, that was the best laugh. Sounded like Coach Tiller. But I would like to thank our astronauts, of course, not only for an enjoyable evening like this, but for all the time and expertise that you've shared over the last few days with our Purdue community and with the good folks in the greater Lafayette area. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank President Daniels for putting together an idea of reuniting our astronauts for all of our benefits. And with that, I'm going to turn it right over to the President for something he'd like to do.
Yeah, thanks, Kirk. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to indulge us just another couple of minutes, indulge me in something we haven't cleared with these men. They probably would have tried to talk me out of it if I had. You know, I'm sure you're having the same sensation I am, that you may have another evening in your life when you're in the presence of more history than we are at this moment, but there won't be many. And when you think of what these men, and by extension, there are 16 comrades who flew, and all those Boilermakers who helped them fly. You know, Gene just told us how awed those brave young men in Afghanistan were to meet Neil Armstrong. We feel just that way meeting the Magnificent Seven here, don't we? So, I want all of you to join me in exercising really a thrill and a personal privilege. The highest award that Purdue University can confer, and I learned early on it can only be conferred by whoever holds the assignment that I do now, is called the Order of the Griffin. The Order of the Griffin is rarely given because it's so rarely earned. The Griffin, you know our symbol, the body, and you could say the heart of a lion, the wings of an eagle. What better description, really, for these 7 men? And so, along with their 2 colleagues who were here for part of the weekend, I'm going to exercise that privilege and ask you to join me in awarding Purdue's highest honor, the Order of the Griffin, to these great Boilermakers, with our thanks for what they've meant to our university and all of our world.
Moving slowly. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, young man. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Go for it. Go for the goal. It's out there. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. It's a good idea because we're dropping it right there. Marvelous surprise. Are you in there? The honor of ours. Oh, good. Good. Oh, I grew up in Maywood, Bellwood, way out there, same place.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being with us.
Okay, excellent.
That's great. You're going to kick them down. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you, Daniel. Don't drop it. Thanks, dude.
Thanks, guys.
Well,
thanks a lot. Thanks, guys.
Mr. President, I'm going to turn it over to Gene Cernan and crew quickly.
We got
Drew, that's you.
Not the mic.
We can't thank you enough for the student body or what your folks have done for us. So
we've got
have
something for you as a
little
surprise,
something in
which we
return.
didn't tell you about.
The program has been hijacked.
Yeah, sorry. I told you we were loose cannons. On behalf of the astronauts, the Purdue astronauts particularly, we wanted to present you, President Daniels, with a photo montage. We've all signed it in thanks for your support and really to the support of the university and to everybody here, all of you great individuals that have come out to support us today. And I'm going to read the citation. Thank you for your continued support of Purdue astronauts and the human space flight. Your dedication and commitment to our nation's efforts in space are critical toward the achievement of future goals. So we thank you for your time, your effort, your support. It means so much to us for what you've done in the past and what we know you're doing now in support of us and future astronauts. So thank you for your support.
All right. My goodness.
And that flag flew on STS-134, the final flight of Endeavour, on our mission to space. So that's your memento.
Fantastic, thank you.
Wow. Just give us all a second here while President Daniels and I quit geeking out. That is absolutely amazing. Once again, thank you to our astronauts. Thank you, President Daniels. And ladies and gentlemen, as always, be safe in any direction that you go. The very best to you, and hail Purdue.
Thank you.
Yes,